Hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your Critique of the Week for October 8th, 2021. So glad you could join me. Let's see. We have D. Coleman and Spartacus there from Bristol, UK. Good to see you. It's been a while, Spartacus. I got James Langford. Hello to James. We're on YouTube. Let's see. We got Facebook. Who's on Facebook? Let's see. Don't see any comments yet, but we got some people here watching. Well, I'm so glad you could join me. A lot of stuff going on this week. We're trying to do an upgrade on the website. And let me know, did you get your poem by email in the morning? Can somebody mention that? Because I know I got mine, but I'm not sure if everybody did. Nate Jacob is here. Jenna Pashley, Smith, Peter, King, Badger O'Donohue. Good to see you too. Yeah, so I'm trying to get everything like reconnected on the website after this upgrade we're doing. And I don't know, it's been kind of a headache for me. I'm one of those people who, I don't know, I don't like flying because I can't be the pilot, you know? And so I do everything myself usually, and I let some other web designers do the website update that I wanted. And we're trying to get everything reconnected. So let me know if you got your poem by email this morning, if you're signed up already. I know that it didn't display the whole thing. I think it just did an excerpt, and I'm trying to fix that too. But I want to make sure it went out. I got 2 this morning and yesterday. Thanks, Richard. Yeah. So, okay, cool. So that's back working, even though I have to figure out how to take it off of excerpt mode. But that's good. Okay, they're great poems too. The last 2 poems. Anyway, so this is the critique of the week. As always, we are sitting around workshop styling some poems. We have 2 poets this week. It is Anita Lerek and Tamara Luckinbill, who I have to write down. I forgot to put the name on top of it's Tamara Luckinbill. Okay. And so Anita's been around a good amount. She comes to these critiques sometimes, and she's in the Rattlecast sometimes. So good to see you here, Anita. Let's see. Okay. So, but the point is to give that workshop experience to people who might not have access to the power of writing workshops and share poetry that way. And so let's dive into this first poem. And as I should have said, leave your comments. I'll pass as many as long as I can, and the poets will be looking at these later. So any thoughts you want to share, please do. Now, here is the first poem, Marriage Blue. And again, this is Anita Lerek. This is actually a published poem. She says, an earlier version published in Medium Scream Cry, January 2021. And this is Marriage Blue version 1.5. It's always interesting to see. I kind of like it when poets, it doesn't affect the judging or anything, but I like it when poets list the version it is. It's kind of fun to see that at the bottom of poems, which happens in submissions sometimes. Because sometimes it'll say like version 2.93, and it's just interesting to see. But anyway, this is Marriage Blue. And she says it's been revised. What did it need to say? She said something in particular about these poems. What was it? She said, let's see, I have an iterative writing style. I'm continuously polishing my poems, which is, this versions thing that she mentions below. And so, I see my writing as meditation going deeper and deeper with each revision she's referring to. So see what you think is what she says. So let's see what we think. This is Marriage Blue, a revision from the published version. And, okay. Marriage Blue. The sun floods the old maple with nothing on but a blue tarp and drives open the chilling human ground, where the 11 a.m. television talks to no one in particular, rather bears irreproducible witness to the kitchen, the burnt toast as usual, the reprimands, the despair at the shivering tree under the runaway light, branches outstretched in pointless prayer for the blue marriage getting ready to cover over and disappear. So it's an interesting poem here. Oh, there's my face. Interesting poem here by Anita, Marriage Blue. And I really felt, I sort of felt I got into it more toward the end. And I kind of felt, I felt that marriage a little bit there at the end, which is what you want. So here's the title, Marriage Blue, and it's a reversal repeated of the blue marriage down here, which is interesting. You don't see that very often. Let's start at the beginning here. Marriage Blue. I don't know. It's it sets up an expectation for what's going to happen, the title. The sun floods the old maple with nothing on but a blue tarp. So right away we get an image, and I'm not sure what why there's a blue tarp, but we get the sun flooding an old maple, which is a good image, and of course the blue is pulling in from the blue marriage, and drives open the chilling human ground. Now this is the first time I'm a little lost. I don't know what human ground is, but for 2 lines I'm happy to be lost. I don't mind. Where the 11 a.m. television talks to no one in particular, rather bears irreproducible witness to the kitchen. I think this is a sort of clunky word. If you heard the first time I read it, I tripped over it. But bears witness is kind of a cliche too. So you couldn't just cut it and say bears witness, because that's a boring cliche. What does irreproducible even add here? Like what? Talks to no one in particular, rather bears irreproducible. Like how is the witness not reproducible? And who is the witness? I guess where the 11 a.m. television talks to no one in particular, is it the television bearing witness? I'm not sure. So this is something I'd work on right here. And it's a long clunky word, irreproducible. It's a 6-syllable word, and I tripped over it too. It doesn't really fit with the other language in the poem. So I might cut that just for the sound of it, first of all. But then also, it's sort of a cliche-ish kind of thing. So I would, and actually, D. Coleman here says I'd cut irreproducible over on YouTube. Thanks, D. So yeah, so I'd cut that and play with this little section right here. The burnt toast, as usual. I don't think you need the as usual. I think the as usual is, sort of built in. It's like baked in the cake already, or burnt in the toast. The burnt toast, the reprimands, and then you get this nice rhythm, right? The little list run here. The burnt toast, the reprimands, the despair, I should say, at the shivering tree under runaway light. Again, we go back to this tree image from here, and I like this little run. It's very, very musical, and the images come out too. Branches outstretched in pointless prayer. I love the pointless prayer too. The alliteration is nice too. For the blue marriage, getting ready to cover over and disappear. So I think, I don't know, I'm feeling like the despair of this blue marriage by the end, which is really the point of the poem, right? Is to get into that emotional space. And I think maybe the poem could sort of sing with a better last line. To cover over and disappear is kind of what you expect, and there's nothing unusual about it. And, we kind of have like a novelty bias or something. Like there's a reason why, the weirdest news stories are the ones that fix in our brain. It's because we're drawn to things that we don't expect. And we already are feeling this cover over and disappear, like that sort of sense of what's going on there. And so it feels like there's some way, Anita mentioned going through a lot of versions of this poem, and it feels like there's some way that I don't know, you could just go somewhere interesting with that last line and really make it sort of sing. So this is the 2 things I would add here: this last line, and find a different way to say this bears irreproducible witness. I'm not even sure bears witness is necessary. Richard Westheimer, I think it was, right? Yeah, Dick Westheimer said, I think the TV is a dispassionate observer of what's happening in the kitchen. And that's what I kind of thought too. Clayton Clark says I'd go with the old maple bears witness. It's a little awkward. I'm not sure who's bearing witness, but I think my opinion was going with Dick Westheimer. It's that the television is what's bearing witness, which is an interesting concept, and maybe that's something to expand and play on. And maybe even when we said this, this last line wasn't really doing it, wasn't really adding anything. Maybe coming back to the TV, like getting ready. I don't know, somehow pulling that TV back in might be a way to end this poem in an interesting way that's memorable. But that's kind of seems like all it's missing. I kind of like it otherwise. The human ground I'm not sure about either. Maybe I should highlight that. Drives open. So this was the blue tarp, right? The sun floods the old maple with nothing on but a blue tarp, and drives open the chilling human ground. I mean, that human ground is something to me. That I'm not really. Why is it human ground? I still never understand that idea. Let me see what people are saying. So Hege, Anita, Jacobson, Lepre says, this brought me right back to the backyard with a maple tree I had only a few months ago. Nice. Nate Jacobs points out lots of nice sounds, especially toward the end. Yeah, I agree. Susan mentions maybe end with pointless prayer. I did like that line a lot. But I wonder, I feel like the impulse to push it a little farther was true. Like if there's this weird way that poetry and humor are related. And in one of the tricks in comedy that I heard, I listened to, I don't know who I was listening to, but someone was saying, it was probably on the Joe Rogan podcast, but somebody was saying that the trick to comedy is that you have to like give a joke and then give a second joke to add on top of it, because there's like a multiplier effect. And so, so like two jokes, like where you, like one sort of punchline is where you don't expect, and then the second punchline sort of takes it even deeper to where you don't expect, right? And so there's this weird way that poems in comedy work in the same way. There's like a humor, it's like a different spin of humor is what art's doing. It's weird, but it's true. And so if you ended in the pointless prayer, it's like ending on one punchline. And there's a feeling that it could go farther. And if I ended here, I think I would want it to go farther. I think that might be my comment. So I think the impulse to go farther is accurate, I think. I think that, the writer's impulse to do more with that than just end at pointless prayer. I think that was a good impulse, but it just doesn't really, it ends up being flat, that second thing. So something here is the focus. And I'm not sure what. I mean, maybe another draft had a different line that might but maybe bringing this, because the human ground doesn't make sense to me still. And also I think the TV could come back too, the television. So something there might work. And Nate Jacobs said, I do wish I understood the purpose of the tarp. It would start me off with more meaning from the beginning. Yeah. That's never really resolved either. This whole, the vision of the maple is a really powerful, sort of striking image. But we never really know why the blue tarp's there and what the chilling human ground is. The sun's warming. I'm not really sure. Why would you I think you put a tarp. And would you, let's see. I don't know. Would you put a tarp around a maple to protect from frost and then the sun's warming it? I know you do that with fruit trees if they're small fruit trees. Would you do that with a maple too? If it was a young maple, maybe? I'm not sure. But it's an old maple, so I don't know. I'm not sure what the tarp is doing there. And I'd like to know. Jamie O'Halloran Whitmarsh says, strong images here. Confusion for me stems from grammar issues. The sun is wearing the blue tarp in the first two lines. Is that, I don't know. I don't, the sun floods the old maple with nothing on but a blue tarp. There's an ambiguity to it, but I think it could be read either way, right? I mean, maybe the ambiguity is a problem. The sun floods the old maple with nothing on but a blue tarp. I mean, this is one, the line break makes it seem like it's not, but the old maple with nothing on but a blue tarp is like one noun phrase, how I read it in my mind anyway. Suzanne Boucher says, are they outside? I imagine out the kitchen window is what I thought. Hege says, I like the cycling back to blue toward the end, but disappear trips me up. The disappear. It doesn't feel right. I think this last line is just it's not hitting the mark. It's almost like an Olympic person doing the, pummel vault or whatever you call it, and not sticking the landing or something. It's like a little trip there that didn't sell the whole routine home. Dana Broadhead says human ground because humans have taken over nature, perhaps. Yeah, that's an interesting interpretation of that. And Carol Standish Morris says the blue tarp and the blue marriage echo. Yeah, they definitely do. Sharon Frente, I would end with the blue marriage and tell more of what is before that. Yeah, and maybe if you do end, we talked about this, I think just last week, right? But if you end with a blue marriage, which I think was a good ending, if it was a pointless prayer for the blue marriage, I think that could work as an ending. But then marriage blue ends up being a pretty boring title. So maybe change the title if you take up who was that? whoever's advice that was. Sharon Ferrante. Okay, let's see. And now I think we're going to move on. Oh, James Langiver says blue tarp is the sky. Let's see. The sun floods the old maple with nothing on but a blue tarp and drives open the chilling human ground. Interesting. Okay, so I didn't read it that way. But I think James might be right. Blue tarp is the sky. So that's a metaphor. And like somebody else said, and Tamara Luckinbill. Oh, hey, Tamara. Tamara's here. We'll get to her poems in a minute, but the blue tarp could be the sky. I read this poem as a narrative of day coming and going. Interesting. So I took the blue tarp, and I think most people did here, is literal, and not a metaphor. But that is, the sun floods the old maple with nothing on but a blue tarp. So I think maybe if you just switch these, if you started out with nothing on but a blue tarp, the sun floods the old maple, then you would know that the tarp, that ambiguity of who's wearing the tarp would be gone. So maybe that's a way to fix that. And then that kind of changes everything. So the drives open the chilling. I don't understand still why human ground. But then we get this sort of domestic scene that the sun, and it kind of changes a little bit too, if you think of it that way. If you think the focus is more on that puts the focus more on the daybreak than the maple. When you realize that the tarp is just a metaphor for the sky. And so that makes the focus more about daylight coming. And so I kind of read the poem a little differently than where the 11 a.m. television talks no one in particular, bears your reprousal, the burnt toast, the reprimands, the despair. So we're getting this whole sort of days here, although it's 11 a.m. already. So it's not quite daybreak, but it's warming. So what I'm imagining is, some kind of, something happened over the night and the day is sort of coming to thaw that chill of whatever happened the night before. But the marriage is still stuck in this, waiting to disappear type thing. I don't know. It's an interesting poem. So let's see. So Tanya Brookings says, without saying it, she inspired my mind's eye to see the TV as a blue glow. Interesting. Okay. I think we should move on to the next poem. The next one's a little longer from Anita. This is Jazz Paradiso. Homage to Cinema Paradiso love theme is performed by trumpeter Chris Botti. I sit on the stage of a family dinner, facing the pearl set in silence. What use can an old oyster be, ancestor in waiting? I step closer, take her hand, see the fields where we sang scattered flowers before. It is said that flowers cling to those who are afraid. She brushes me away into chiaroscuro nights where light and shade mark up alleys, clubs, hushed martinis, runny leftovers designed by need. Where the wild oyster is a night body, unhinged in the play of flesh and melody, gliding freely before becoming rock. Where family secrets spill out to tipsy strangers, about one inside the other like bedrock, then eroded by turbulence, willed far away, yet so near, particles swept into separate cliffs staged in silence. In the room where sounds come and go, you talk to forsaken ancestors. Your notes enter me drop by drop as slow rain dissolves rock into clawed rooms. You stand on your mount and blow. Growls, trembles, flutters, moans climb up and down angry walls. Prophet, mouthpiece, run your tongue, run your lips, raise your horn, slow hold beyond holding until the note breaks across the skies of jilted ancestors. Entice them back to talk to me. In this oyster room, buried deep, bitten out of time, family voices rise, frame by frame in malice, then collapse, as undressing mouths severed from word, from blame, rather species struck together in song from before. I kneel before them and weep, here in evening primrose room, yellow petals open all night, listening, evening stars listening, room consecrated by the night and by the melody. That is Jazz Paradiso. Another very vivid poem that's taken me somewhere. So, and I like the title a lot. It's a good title, Jazz Paradiso. It sets the stage a little bit, and it's a little bit unique, so it stands out, so it's memorable. Homage to Cinema Paradiso love theme, as performed by, I should probably have a quote, as performed by trumpeter Chris Body. I sit on the stage of a family dinner facing the pearl set in silence. Again, the pearl set, does anybody know what that means? Is that a TV? Because we're sitting around a TV at the family dinner. So I sit on the stage of a family dinner facing the pearl set in silence. There's the pearl set like a dressed up sort of group of people. I'm not sure. So that line confused me. But maybe that's just a reference that I don't get. What use can an old oyster be? So maybe this does, pearl wearing family members. I don't know. It's a little, I'm not sure. And we get this ancestors repeat a lot in this poem. In waiting, I step closer, take her hand, see the fields where we sang, scattered flowers before. It is said that flowers cling to those who are afraid. Brush me away into chiaroscuro nights, where light and shade mark up alleys, clubs, hushed martinis. So the music is taking us back in time, and we're sort of getting what the music here recalls in the mind, which is I think it's working well so far. Other than a little bit of confusion that I'm not exactly sure about. Elaine D'Entremont Sorrentino says a pearl drum set. That's interesting. And Lois Perch Villamere says pearl oyster. Nate Jacob says I like that echo of proof rock. And Dana, let's see. Okay. And Sheridan Fronte says, I love the what use can an old oyster be? So I'm just pretty much I'm pulled into the poem. I'm not having really any problems feeling engaged at this point. I don't know about everybody else here. The chiaroscuro nights. What does chiaroscuro mean? I can't remember. That's one of those words that I see it. I remember what it means for a little while, and then I don't see it for like 3 years, and I forget again. So let me look it up later. It's a treatment of light and shade in drawing and painting. Okay, and then it's got here. I'll even show you. It's got some examples. Oops. Where's my there you go. So it's got some examples here of different chiaroscuro going on. So it's this light and darkness play in paintings. So okay. The chiaroscuro nights, where light and shade mark up alleys. That makes sense. You don't even need to know what it means in context. Clubs, hushed martinis, runny leftovers, designed by need. Designed by need isn't interesting. That's one of those things. See, I keep feeling like I'm like drawn into the poem really well, especially at the beginning. Then every once in a while, there's these lines come up that I don't really understand. The ancestor in waiting, the pearl set, and the designed by need. I'm having trouble like connecting the dots there. Where the wild oyster is a night body unhinged in the play of flesh and melody. Where the wild oyster is a night body unhinged in the play of flesh and melody, gliding freely before becoming rock. I don't know. I mean, that's a leap to some kind of very creative place. And I think as long as it's interesting and stays within itself, like sense making or whatever, self-sensible. I don't know. As long as it does that, it's okay. So, and I kind of fine with this, where the old oyster is a night body, unhinged. We get back to this oyster and the pearls again. Is there some kind of form going on here where certain words are repeated in each stanza? Well, maybe not. where the wild oyster is a night body unhinged in the play of flesh and melody, gliding freely before becoming rock, where family secrets spill out to tipsy strangers, about one inside the other like bedrock, then eroded by turbulence. See, I really like these sort of leaps that into a metaphorical place where, as long as you're grounded and you have something kind of to hold on to, then they work. And I think they work here because we know that we're listening to, we have this, we're listening to Cinema Paradiso Love Theme performed by, so we can go where sort of the mind wanders and where we feel okay to do that and don't worry that we're being lost. So that works as a kind of touchstone throughout the poem, that's what we're doing, and sort of lets us flow and roam freely within the poet's imagination or the speaker's imagination. Willed far away yet so near, particles swept into separate cliffs, staged in silence. And staged in silence is one of those things I'm not sure, anyway. In the room where sounds come and go, you talk, and then that's the reference to proof rock that somebody mentioned. You talk to forsaken ancestors. So again, we get this ancestors, which keeps coming back. I think it's 3 times we mention ancestors, and I'm not quite sure why that is. Your notes enter me drop by drop. And so all of a sudden, too, do we have a you anywhere else? So I'm sitting on the stage here, I. Where family secrets spill, I, in the room. And then you talk of forsaken ancestors. So the you doesn't appear until like way on in the poem, like almost halfway through the poem, or actually halfway. And it's always a little jarring to have a different person appear, because poems aren't that long, and to have somebody that you weren't expecting there. It's almost like if you enter a room and you don't realize somebody's there and you're doing stuff for a little while, then you turn around and someone's there. It's like startling. It's that same kind of startle reflex. Like, oh, there's someone else here, even though we kind of know, we realize that we're talking suddenly now to Chris Body that was referenced at the beginning. So it'd be nice to get a you somewhere in this, talk to Chris a little bit so it keeps it consistent and doesn't throw us out of the poem right there in that jarring way. Your notes enter me drop by drop. And I don't even know if we need the you, though, actually. Couldn't just the notes enter me drop by drop? Couldn't we just go through there? Couldn't we say Chris standing on, or the trumpeter standing on your mount, or on his mount, growls, tremble? I'm not sure what we get out of adding the you, actually, because the poem isn't really an address to the trumpeter. So I would probably just take out the you, actually, and just keep that in the third person. Like, talk about the notes. The trumpeter stands on his mount and blows, growls, trembles, flutters, moans, climb up and down angry walls. A lot of great, just throughout both these 2 poems, there's a lot of great sounds and a lot of great rhythms. Prophet and mouthpiece, run your tongue, run your lips, raise your horn, slow, hold beyond holding until the note breaks across skies of jilted ancestors. Again, we get this ancestors. And I don't understand where to connect that. And why it's repeated. Like, having it repeat 3 times makes it seem like it's like the heart of the poem. And I'm not really sure. I mean, I understand bringing back like memories of ancestors and making you think about the past and sort of being connected through this music. But why ancestors itself? Ancestor in waiting. I can't remember where the other ancestor was. Oh, there it is. The forsaken ancestors, the jilted ancestors. Entice them back to talk to me. So I'm not sure what the why ancestors play such a strong role in this poem. In the oyster's room, buried deep, bitten out of time, family voices rise frame by frame in malice then collapse, an undressing mouth severed from word, from blame, rather species struck together in song from before. I don't know if the before, I'd probably cut that. I kneel before them, and then the before repeats too. I kneel before them and weep, here in evening primrose room. And this stanza, they're just a lot of dropped articles. I kneel before them and weep, here in evening primrose room. Yellow petals open all night, listening, evening stars listening, room consecrated by the night. We get the night again, but but know the room, a lot of dropped articles, which make it sort of clunky at the end. So, put the articles back, which is interesting because the critique, or not the critique of the week, the prompt for Sunday is to write a poem with no articles. But it's hard to do. We'll see what people can come up with for that challenge. So anyway, let me see what you're saying about it, because I feel, I'm sort of taken on a journey with this poem in a way that I enjoy, but I also feel like I'm left out a little bit about what the significance of the ancestors are. I think that's sort of the key that I can't sort of unlock as I read this poem. And maybe it's just a false, like a red herring, maybe it doesn't really matter as much, but it feels like there's something I'm missing with the way that the ancestors repeat. If it's just like that we have a connection through time, through the music, I don't think repeating the ancestors like this is justified. But if there's something more that I'm missing, then that's not clear. So let me see what you're saying though. And Jamie O'Halloran Whitmarsh says striking images, but they seem private. Yeah, that's what I'm saying too. I or you, this is Sharon Ferrante, I or you, the you would have to be shown. Who? The ancestors. Suzanne Boucher says the oyster shell symbolizes the ancestors. And Mark Grenier says, I think the you is body playing the horn. Yeah, that's definitely the you, but it just appears out of nowhere and then disappears, and we were never talking to, I don't know if I'm saying it right, Body or Bodhi or someone, but we're never, he only appears as someone being addressed in this little section and then goes away. I think it's just, it throws you out a little bit doing that. Nate Jacob says the poem is too much for me to follow. There's great imagery and metaphor, but it gets entangled within itself. That's a good way to put it. Pearls and ancestors, are they referring to one another? And Jamie O'Halloran Whitmarsh again says, is this an homage? And it says it is, but it really doesn't feel like it is, does it? So, yeah, that's an interesting point too. Virginia Cass says there's so much there, and I need the whole poem to think about it. I begin to have a feeling for the speaker, but it's incomplete. Yeah, this is what we're all feeling. Like we're just feeling a little too disconnected from what's actually going on. We need a little bit of the backstory that the poet knows, or because you're writing this poem, like what you're writing about, but we really don't. Like we don't know how the ancestors and the oysters tie together. And the family secrets too. Like, what are the family secrets? And I mean, and that's in the jazz club, but that seems to imply that there's something with this family dinner. Like we don't quite know. It's like a murky picture, and you could sort of pull out that so we don't need to feel like we were missing something. Like you could sort of focus more on the homage. And move through like the scenes that it conjures up in your mind. But the fact that it points to this family history and the ancestors and things makes me want to know what's going on, which means you really should tell us a little bit more so we can figure what it is. And Mark Grenier says it needs more family secrets, perhaps. Yeah. I think that's the case with this. I haven't looked at YouTube in a bit. Let's see. So Dick Westheimer, for me, there are too many successive riddles to figure out here. Yeah. James Langford, there appears to be such potential, but I am lost climbing through this work, perhaps to shorten it to clarify. Carlian Blackman says, cut all references to ancestors. I don't know. I think there's just two directions, like a path diverged in the wood or whatever. You could either pull it back and shorten it and just focus on the homage and carry us through as the mind wanders listening to this music. I don't know if I should read it, but I have a poem. This reminds me of a little bit from my book about the bending of birches. And there's at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, I listened to a cello recital where somebody was performing a piece they'd made up based on that. And so I was moving through like my mind as I was listening to it and what that conjured up. And this is a similar kind of thing. So you could do that without adding this sort of family mystery that you're sort of hinting at. or and drop all that, or you could go the other direction and explain some of this family mystery, history, the ancestors that we're talking about, and then that would work too. So it's one or the other. You kind of have to pick one, and the problem is that it sort of goes in the middle and is just like bushwhacking through instead of taking a path. So there you go with this one, and we're past the half an hour mark, so we better move on to the next poem. Let's see. Okay, so let's move on, and the next poem is The Next Poet. But once again, that was Anita Lerek, and really good pieces. I like the imagery and the music. I feel how that, even if we're lost, it still makes us enjoy the poem just because there's music and image. So note that too. Now the next poet, Tamara Luckinbill, who is here. We saw her on YouTube earlier. Social Distancing with Polypodia K. I don't know. I'm going to look that word up too for you, so because I don't know what it is. I think the second poem has the same word in the title, so it seems pretty important. What is that? It's a scientific word, of course. Okay. So it's a family of ferns. Here, let me show you a picture too. So this is what we're talking about here. This kind of fern. Oops, I gotta click there. This kind of fern here. These little interesting. So anyway, this is what this poem is about, and so it is social distancing with I don't even know how to say it. Polypodiaceae. Oh yeah, you'd say yeah. Polypodiaceae. Am I saying that right? Anyway, social distancing with polypodiaceae. Socially distance. I don't think you well, I don't know. Maybe. Let's just read it. Social distancing with polypodiaceae. Socially distanced. Here are fern parts, 6 feet apart. Rhizomes under earth. Root stalks grow up. Keep your mask on. Outside, node hastening. 5 months in. From spore to scale. Breathing barely. Shin height. Upright, shining. Unfurling. Biological ticking. A blade blooms. Standing singular, thinking. Blossom at midrib. Access. All alone. Pinule. Stomach unflat. Leaflet sourdough. Gaining my first fat. Mature, mateless, reaching 40. Self-sufficient. Ovaries in the hen house. Is this the... I'm not sure. I guess this is the same poem still. Asexual... Or is this a different? Because this, having this capitalized line here makes it seem like a title, and it's on the new page. This was a PDF, so it was how it was sent. Anyway, I think this is a different poem. Let me see if I think we had 3. Well, I don't know. The other poem here is underlined too, so maybe that's just part of the same poem. It's got the same back and forth. I'm just not sure. Tamara is here. So Tamara, let me know if this is one poem or and continued from the first. I'm going to assume it is. Asexual polypodiaceae, fresh eggs, propagate, recreate, birth, yearning, gardening, life flowing, on and on, alone as one, frond undone. Okay, so, and Tamara says, same poem, keep going. Thanks, Tamara. So I'm glad you're here for that, because I think that was the case, but I wasn't sure. So this is interesting. We don't get a lot of submissions actually that are sort of in this divorce. I think maybe we have a reputation for being a more narrative poetry based magazine, which is justified because we do tend to lean toward narrative stuff. Although I like to have a lot of variety too, so there's a sort of mix between those. And I do try to make sure we have some things that are non-linear and sort of fragmented and stuff. In every issue, I try to have a lot of variety. But we don't get a lot of stuff that's this sort of chopped up. Social distance. So I love the concept, first of all. Social distancing. I still can't say it right. Polypodiaceae. But I love the concept of this social distancing with, and then there's this the instructions for social distancing matched up with this. We go back and forth in two voices. Socially distance here, fern parts 6 feet apart, rhizomes under earth, rootstocks, grow up. So why would the grow up be, with no punctuation? It makes the, I'm going to assume that every time there's a capital letter, a capitalized word, that means a new sentence. Socially distance. So it's almost like it does. Carl Blackman mentions that it feels like haiku-ish, and it does feel sort of like that renku, that back and forth linked type thing too as we go. Socially distanced, here are fern parts 6 feet apart, rhizomes under earth, rootstocks. Grow up, keep your mask on. Outside, node hastening, 5 months in, from spore to scale. Breathing barely, shin height, upright, shining, unfurling. So I'm kind of, I don't know, the whole social distancing thing, the keep your mask on, is something that people have written so many poems about that I find myself enjoying this side better than this side. So maybe, and it might just be me though, because I've read so many poems. So maybe that's not an issue yet for people, but at some point it might be as people keep publishing more and more books about the pandemic. So I would try to make this a little more interesting in a way. Find ways to make each line surprising is something I'd focus on, because once we get the 6 feet apart, keep your mask on, we sort of just kind of know what's going on over there. Node hastening. So James Langford says, two lives compared, a fern and the writer. Let's see. So Anna Yins has several poems. I think it can be read in two ways. One with the italic lines. Yeah, it's sort of a refrain. Like it is like two poems mixed almost. The kind of thing you'd read in two voices. But anyway, I'm feeling I had to look up that, but it's ferns, and I'm connected to this part. Right here, upright, shining, unfurling. This kind of ends up as flat to me. I think the shin height works, but then the upright, shining, unfurling. These what do you call them? Participles. When you do that and unfurling, it's sort of a, I don't know, it's a weak way of writing just syntactically. It sort of gets boring really quickly, the shining, unfurling. And I don't know, so do that in a more interesting way. Biological ticking. A blade blooms, standing, singular, thinking. Blossoms at mid-rib. So what really, to me, what I feel like here is that each little, like, since it's so disconnected and haiku, like Carlian said, I really need to hold my attention. I need each sort of utterance to be interesting. And so when it is, blossoms at mid-rib, I find this little section interesting, right? But then, and maybe the biological ticking, I find that interesting too. But like this, I don't. And so the poem sort of lives or dies as each little utterance is interesting or not. And so it really you have to find a way to make each section, each little tiny bit interesting. And I think that's what's sort of missing in this poem. It's an interesting concept, though. A blade blooms. I like the comparison, though, between the aloneness during the pandemic and a fern somehow. There's some weird connection there. It's really interesting to play with. All alone. What does that word pinule mean? Another word I have to look up. It's 3 today. Pinule. And that is the center stalk of the fern. Okay. I think. Let's see. Oh, no, that's the leaf of the fern. Pinna and pinule. Here, I'll show you this picture, too. This is, again, from Wikipedia's image. So the pinna, I'm not even sure. Here's another one. So one sort of stem of the fern, and of course a fern is like a fractally thing, so each stem is like its own plant. It's repeating the same pattern. And that's why I was starting saying that I got distracted. That's what I like about this, that the idea of the fern, this like repeating pattern as a metaphor for the pandemic and for social distancing and that sort of isolation, the aloneness, and the sort of like the stopping of time and the way days keep repeating, like Groundhog Day, the movie. There's something where a fern is a great metaphor for that because of the way that the fractal nature of the plant. And so I love the metaphor that's undergirding this poem. I think it's really cool. Let's see. Let's go to the. Here we go. So Panul. So this is the leaf part. Stomach unflat. I'm certain the stomach unflat is a weird line. I'm not sure what that is getting at. Gaining my first fat. But leafless sour, gaining my first fat. Mature mateless, reaching 40. So this feeling of aloneness, exacerbated by the pandemic. Self-sufficient. Ovaries in the hen house. See, this is an interesting phrase. Ovaries in the hen house. If each of these lines is interesting as ovaries in the hen house, it's a great poem. And that's kind of the thing to focus on, I think. If you're writing in this style, it just has to be really engaging because you don't have the narrative thread to hold on to. And so focusing on keeping the lines as interesting as that is like the key, I think, to this style. Let's see. Asexual polypodacia. Man, that's hard to say. So are they asexual? They reproduce? Yeah, I guess they do. They clone themselves. Fresh eggs, propagate, recreate, birth, yearning, gardening. See, so this is not nearly. Look at the difference between ovaries and the hen house. Like how evocative and unexpected that is. That's a really cool line. But then compare that to birth, yearning, gardening. It just doesn't have the same thing. I mean, the fresh eggs is interesting, after that, because it recalls the hen house thing. But this isn't as interesting. So you kind of lose what you have going a little bit there. Life flowing on and on, alone is one, frond undone. So I like this concept and I like the style too. I love seeing poems that are done in an unusual way, and I get at the meaning. Like it makes sense to me. It's all working together. It's just that each line needs to find a way to be engaging as the ovaries in the hen house. And so maybe one of the things is maybe make it shorter, so you don't have to have as many sort of lightning striking lines. That might be a way to go about it too. But let's see, I've been talking a lot about this poem. Let's see. So Nate Jacobs says, I see the tension here. I get it, but the lines are too sparse to really strengthen it. Each line needs to be more powerful if it is going to fill out the tension. So I think the people who are the regulars on the Critique of the Week, like Nate Jacobs and Richard Westheimer and Sharon Ferrante and everybody, we all say the same thing because we kind of have taken poems apart so often. But yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. Let's see. So, Sharon Ferrante, I would end it all alone, and it could be a haiku or senryu sequence. Yeah, you could do that too. I mean, if you wanted to, and that might be a way to make each, like the thing that's missing, we keep saying, is that each of these lines isn't interesting. And one way to make it interesting is to force yourself to do more. You could make it a haiku sequence, like actually follow the rules of a renge or something. Like go back to the Rattlecast just a couple weeks ago with Deborah Picolaggi, who was talking about the renge form. Write it in that form, and have the two voices in your head competing, and that would like bring out surprising, interesting things that could make these sections more compelling. So that's one idea for something to do. Anna Yin points out the shape of the poem is like the leaf we see. It's interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but it kind of is. Yeah, you're right. And this could be that could be played up even more and make it even more fern-like in shape. I mean, it could be a concrete poem with each utterance kind of being petals on the fern, and it could get bigger as it goes and then smaller, like a fern does. Interesting suggestion there. Over on YouTube, Cargan Beck says, even a kind of palindrome, perhaps. Clayton Clark, yes, love the ovaries in the hen house. Dick Westheimer, a hyphen between birth and yearning would strengthen that line. So the birth, where was the birth and yearning? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, great point. Yeah. So just little tiny things like that. A hyphen right there. If it was birth yearning, that goes from something, because I read it as like a list sort of separated, but birth yearning is an interesting phrase. But then gardening is kind of boring. So you got to kind of find a way to make this interesting too. But birth yearning with a hyphen actually is more interesting. Terry R says ovaries in the henhouse could be a great middle line for haiku, just saying. Yeah. Let's see. Where's, So I saw a comment. There's a comment here from Tamara who says, yes, Amanda, you got it. Where's the Amanda? I'm trying to find what Tamara is replying to. I not see it though. Okay. Well, anyway. Anyway, let's. I think we sort of hit this poem pretty well. Let's move on to the next one. The next one's a little longer, and again, an interesting style. And I only got to glance at these before we started, so I don't really know. I have no idea what's going to go on here, but I'm not in any rush, so we might go over the 1 hour time frame. That's fine. Salguiro Correo porcelain. Another thing I'm going to look up. Let's see what that is. And this is what I do. I love learning. So one of the things I love about reading submissions is that there are things to look up very often. Let's see. Oh, that's a weeping willow. Porcelain. Well, now I'm confused. So, the fable. Okay. Man, this might be a lot to learn. This is from a journal, a literary journal of lore, which is interesting. We have this page here. Oh, and there's Tamara. So, interesting. So this is something. There's a fable about a woman and her lover who turn into birds. In some versions of the story, it is only an afterlife. I'm not going to read this whole thing. Let's let the poem speak for itself first, because this is Tamara. But you see this somehow it has to do with this the porcelain here in the story. And Google said that the Salgurio Correo is a fern. I mean, not a fern, a weeping willow. Anyway, very interesting content in these two poems. Tamara, thanks for sharing these. I'm going to read this later. I'll leave it up. But was it really a... Let's see. Was it really a fern? Is that just my... Did I misread something? I'm not a fern, a weeping willow. Yeah, that's a weeping willow. So this must be like the myth of what a weeping willow... A myth behind a weeping willow. And it's a porcelain piece that has that on there, I assume. Okay. So this story begins, a father, padre, his filha, daughter, control, let her go. Dykes our ear. It isn't the beginning, the ending, the centuries-old tale. It isn't the drama of the man who chases his daughter away, imprisoned, presso, a woman, her lover turned, pasar inha. Afterlife, corpos, fly away, one another. Over this fence, is it a bridge? The girl crosses over with her heart along a babbling stream. He isn't significant, the man, or the ass, a secretary, or a farmer, or a pauper, a homme pobre, all unworthy of her. Sorry, I gotta move my mouse pad over a little bit. Okay, there we go. Beauty, even if she isn't bonito, unworthy just the same. A good man does not steal this mauseo, stole her. It isn't right. She had to belong in the first place. What is really important about this canto isn't crime, blood unworthy, interference, these ethereal beings. At the ending, these gods or angels, or fadas bondasas, who turn the two runaways into birds. The most important piece of this tale is actually thousands of pieces of this fable preserved throughout time in porcelain Salguiro Correo. Freedom and flight. So that's interesting. I don't know. So I don't think the mythology. I assume what I'm assuming what we're looking here is a, and maybe we do have to read this article, but just looking at this article, and it was written by Tamara Luckinbill, who's the poet here, is what came up on Google when I typed in Salguiro Correo. And so it doesn't seem like it's the kind of thing where enough people, like I'm not really great at like knowing myths and remembering things, which is why I Google things all the time. But it doesn't seem like this is popular enough, a well-known enough myth like Persephone, which I also have trouble remembering, but most people do. So you can just talk about Persephone and people get it usually. But this mythology doesn't seem common enough to me to not tell the story. It sounds like a really interesting story. Let's see. And so I think there's a real opportunity here to tell this story, which we really don't get. It's written in a way as if we already know what the fable that we're talking about is. And Googling it here, let's see. What if I just type in Weeping Willow Fable or something? The Legend of the Weeping Willow Tree. No, that's not it either. So there's a story here that it's sort of written as if it assumes kind of that we know the story, but we really don't. This story begins, a father, Padre, his Philhad daughter, control, let her go. Daixara ear, which it isn't the beginning, the ending, the centuries-old tale. It isn't the drama. So we're talking it's like meta discussion. Like we're talking about the story as a thing without like really getting to hear the story. Maybe if this were, in a series, it would make more sense. And if this story was already told, like in a book, but as a standalone poem, I want to hear the story, and we really don't get it. It isn't the drama of the man who chases his daughter away, imprisoned, presso, the woman, her lover turned Passaro, Passarinha, afterlife, corpos fly away, one another. So I'm imagining that there's some kind of like love story, like a Romeo and Juliet type story behind the naming of the Weeping Willow, which is really interesting. So I want to hear that. One another, over this fence, is it a bridge? A girl crosses over with her heart along a babbling stream. He isn't significant, the man, or the ass, a secretary or farmer or pauper or hamam pobre, all unworthy of her. Beauty, even if she isn't bonito, unworthy just the same. A good man does not steal this moseo stole her. It isn't right she had to belong in the first place. What is really important about this canto isn't crime, blood, otherworldly indifference, these ethereal beings. At the ending, these gods are angels or fetus bondosas who turn the two runaways into birds. So we kind of get the little tiny bit of the story there. I mean, we're sort of getting around the edges of the story, but I want the whole story. The most important piece of this tale is actually thousands of pieces of this fable preserved throughout time in porcelain. So this feels like if we go here, which I want to read after this show. This is talesoffolklore.com. And if you just type in this, the fable of Salguiro Correo, and this story is written on this porcelain. It sounds fascinating. So I really want to read this article, but what's in this article doesn't seem like it's getting into the poem really, and so I want to hear that story. But we'll just continue though a little bit though. Let's see. The most important piece of this tale is actually thousands of pieces of this fable preserved throughout time in porcelain. Salguiro Correo is freedom and flight. Yeah. So for this, I want the story. And that's all I really have to say about this. It sounds really, really interesting, but we don't get to hear the interesting parts. So Nate Jacobs says, if the title is the entry point, then both of Tamara's titles make the approach rather difficult. It may be time to simplify those for me, the common man. Yeah, I mean, they're both things I had to Google, which make them interesting. I mean, make me want to Google and so learn more. So it sort of gets into that. You kind of couldn't do that before. That's always something always interesting to me. But with the internet now, back, 50 years ago, if you were to have a title like that, you'd really need some like footnotes, which is why like The Wasteland is full of footnotes. But now you can just say, hey, whoever's reading this has a phone. They can Google. Let's see. So Mark Grenier says the blue glaze porcelain is often in a willow pattern, I think. Interesting. So it's often in a willow pattern. Jenny Middleton says, I agree. The poem needs a sense of immediacy. Past tense is overused, making the story seem fixed. The second poem, this is Mark Grenier, the second poem holds together much better than the first, I think. A story of the conflict between the father and daughter. Sharon Ferrante says, I would tell this myth in a more simple way. Yeah, and that's what I would have to say too. I mean, maybe, you could have one part of the poem tell the myth and then something like this be the follow-up, so we sort of get a different perspective on it. Not just the myth, though. There's something to do with the porcelain, which is really interesting too. So I want to get that. I want to get the article here. I want to get that into the poem. Clayton Clark says it's an interesting idea, but I can't get a feel for it. Okay. So I think that's about all we have to say for this. I just want the story, and I'm going to go read that, and I recommend everybody else go read that too. The Fable of Salguero Correo at talesoflore.com. I'm very curious, but I can't just read the whole article here. So if you're interested, go look at that. Let's see. Virginia Cass says, I feel the characters of the story are put down in order to come to the actual concept of time developing myth. Jamie O'Halloran Whitmarsh, is the poem about the myth or the preservation of the story? How has it been passed on? So both of those are interesting. I think that the preservation of it is really interesting too. So there seems like there's so much here to share that's not really being shared. So, and Jamie Whitmarsh again says, yes, Blue Willow China is based on this story. The Latin name for the willow, the botanical name is Salix. So there you go. Okay, so I don't think this is well known enough or well told enough, routinely. So just tell the story. I'm going to say the same thing over and over again, but I really wish the story was here. Yeah. Okay. Well, I do believe that is it for today. Thanks everybody for joining me. It's been a lot of fun looking at these poems and sort of getting back to the regular routine. Let's see. Let me. This week's guest in the Radicast, I already mentioned that the prompt was going to be to write a poem without articles like and the, etc. So try to write a poem like that. A good practice at being abstract and finding a way to make that work. And this week's guest in the Rattlecast is going to be Mark Jarman. Mark Jarman is just, I think I mentioned this before, but Mark is one of the people who, one of the first poets I fell in love with on the page, like him and Li Young Lee, Dorian Lux, I mean. Early on, there were a bunch of books that I read by them when I was still like a science major, just dabbling with reading poetry. And Unholy Silence of his was one of those books that sort of turned me on to poetry and made me like sonnets and form too. He's a new formalist, recently retired from the Vanderbilt University. His book, Dailiness, Essays on Poetry, just came out from Paul Dry Books. He'll also be reading poems from a new manuscript that's coming out next year. And The Heronry is his most recent book of poems. Just great. I'm really looking forward to this episode. It's going to be a really good one. This is Sunday, October 10th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.